Welcome. This month we'll focus on how we can serve Jehovah with rejoicing. As parents know, a child is a source of great joy as well as challenges. We'll see how the good example set by these parents influenced their children. When you think of God's promised new world, do images like these come to mind? How do they make you feel? We are sure you'll enjoy a glimpse of the future in our new music video. And we'll learn how our joy is enhanced when we express appreciation for our family, for our congregation, and for Jehovah. This is the February 2020 edition of JW Broadcasting. To set the stage, we'd like to begin with a few thoughts about the subject, Serve Jehovah with rejoicing. This is what we are told at Psalm 100, verse 2. But do you serve Jehovah with rejoicing all the time? I guess we all will agree that at times it can be difficult to be happy. So then, is it really important to serve Jehovah with rejoicing? And what does it really mean? In other words, what is this joyful attitude that Jehovah expects from us? And what can we do to serve Jehovah with rejoicing and maintain a joyful spirit? How can we prove that it is important to serve Jehovah with rejoicing? You might think of our goal, which is to reflect His personality. In 1 Timothy 1 verse 11, He is called the happy God. So isn't it logical that Jehovah expects us to be happy in His service? In Deuteronomy chapter 28, we find a report of God's dealings with the Israelites. Here Jehovah warned them of what would take place if they became disobedient and lost their joy in serving Him. We read at Deuteronomy chapter 28, beginning in verse 45, "All these curses will certainly come upon you, because you did not listen to the voice of Jehovah your God by keeping His commandments, and because you did not serve Jehovah your God with rejoicing and joy of heart, when you had such an abundance of everything." Jehovah took such good care of the Israelites, and yet they were not happy. This attitude was something He did not like at all. So we see that serving Jehovah joyfully is very important. This was emphasized by what Jesus taught. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, He helped His audience to understand how to be happy. At times, this part in Matthew chapter 5 is referred to as the 9 happinesses. Later, the Apostle Paul wrote about the fruitage of the Spirit. Joy is counted among the aspects of the fruitage of the Spirit. Being joyful is important, and by means of His Spirit, Jehovah helps us to rejoice in His service. But is it realistic to expect that we'll smile all the time and cheerfully sing songs the whole day? Of course, this is not what Jehovah expects. We all have different personalities and express our happiness differently. Also, there are moments in life when we are sad and disappointed. And Jehovah is fully aware that some of us are not healthy. Others might fight depression and are therefore at times just not able to express joy in this way. And yet, He loves all of us and appreciates us very much. So then, what is the joy that Jehovah expects from us? What exactly is this joyful spirit or attitude? Here in Deuteronomy, the term rejoicing means the inner feeling and the outward manifestation of joy. And we also read about the joy of heart. The heart stands for what we are on the inside. This is the interior man and is displayed in all his various activities, desires, affections, emotions, passions, thoughts, and so on. And so we see that joy comes from within us. Yet, does the joy we are talking about depend on circumstances? Let's illustrate. I think it's safe to say that we all like sunshine. However, how does the farmer feel when he urgently needs it to rain? And he's waiting and waiting. He probably would be happier if he had rain. In these last days, we rarely, if ever, have perfect circumstances with no problems. So I think we can all agree that our joy in Jehovah's service is not based on circumstances. And we've had here on this program and in our publications many examples of ones who have maintained their joy in Jehovah's service despite challenging circumstances like poor health or opposition. So then, what is it that makes us a happy person? To help us to open up the scope of the answer, would you be willing to join me for a little experiment? Please close your eyes for a moment. Do you have your eyes closed? So now think about an apple. Now you can open your eyes again. Let me ask you a question. Did you think about a red apple? Green apple? Or a yellow apple? Why are you able to answer this question? All I asked you to do was to think about an apple. The answer is, we think in pictures. In fact, we think of countless pictures every day. And after we think about it, it's like we put all of the pictures in a stack. And then when we think the same thought a second time, it's like we pull the picture out from below and put it on top of the stack. The longer that we do not think the thought, the deeper the picture gets in the stack and it becomes more difficult to remember. Now, this stack of pictures representing our thoughts is our subconscious. This stack of pictures makes up our emotional state or state of mind. It determines whether we are sad or happy, whether we are bored or excited, and so forth. Jehovah, our Creator, is aware of this powerful connection between our thoughts and pictures. Let's please turn to 2 Kings chapter 6 to find one example of how Jehovah made use of this. Here we find the report about the king of Syria who wanted to capture Elisha. How did his attendant feel? Let's see at 2 Kings chapter 6, beginning with verse 15. When the attendant of the man of the true God rose early and went outside, he saw that an army with horses and war chariots was surrounding the city. At once the attendant said to him, "Alas, my master, what are we to do?" The attendant was in fear. He probably thought about their defenseless position and saw himself already captured by the Syrian army. Would Elisha be able to help his attendant? Verse 16. But he, Elisha, said, "Do not be afraid, for there are more who are with us than those who are with them." In other words, Elisha said, think of something else. Think of the many that are with us. Did this work? It seems the attendant was not able to focus on these reassuring thoughts. He could not envision Jehovah rescuing them. How did Jehovah help the attendant? At 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 17, we read, "And then Elisha began to pray and say, 'O Jehovah, open his eyes, please, that he may see.' Immediately Jehovah opened the attendant's eyes, and he saw, and look, the mountainous region was full of horses and war chariots of fire all around Elisha. And Jehovah helped the attendant with pictures. The horses and chariots captured his attention. His thoughts now focused on the fact that Jehovah was with them and in full control. Now in his mind, he already saw Jehovah's victory, and he was not concerned anymore. He was happy. What he saw influenced his thoughts and changed his state of mind. Thoughts are so powerful. And how considerate Jehovah is. Remember, in the end, Jehovah did not need any of these horses and chariots. He saved Elisha and his attendant by striking the Syrian army with blindness. When we compare the emotions of Elisha with his attendant, what made the difference? The circumstances were exactly the same. Their thoughts made the difference. Now, what does this have to do with our subject, serve Jehovah with rejoicing? So far we have established that Jehovah expects us to be happy, right? We have seen that our thoughts can be pictures that influence who we are and how we feel. Pictures and thoughts are closely connected. And that's why the Apostle Paul at Romans 12 verse 2 highlights the importance of our thoughts when he said, "Be transformed by making your mind over." Or at Ephesians 4 verse 23 he emphasized this by saying, "And you should continue to be made new in your dominant mental attitude." Both scriptures highlight that our thoughts are critical and have a bearing on our whole being. Additionally, the Apostle Paul knew that we can change our thinking. Please turn with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and see what he recommends that we do. Here in 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5, he says, "We are bringing every thought into captivity to make it obedient to the Christ." Isn't this exactly what we should do? We control what we think. We avoid occupying our mind with thoughts that weaken our faith, or thoughts that undermine our determination to serve Jehovah. Remember, we said, thoughts are like pictures that stay within us. We cannot delete them, and they will have an effect on how we feel. But is there something else we can do? Are you ready for a second experiment? Please close your eyes again and do not think of an apple. You can open your eyes again. Were you successful in not thinking of an apple? If so, you probably had to force yourself to think of something else. We are made to think. So, the key for serving Jehovah with rejoicing lies not just in avoiding negative thoughts, but also in thinking healthy thoughts. Philippians chapter 4 lists a few of them. We read in verse 8, "Finally, brothers, whatever things are true, whatever things are of serious concern, whatever things are righteous, whatever things are chaste, whatever things are lovable, whatever things are well spoken of, whatever things are virtuous, and whatever things are praiseworthy, continue considering or thinking about, meditating on these things." By considering and meditating on these healthy subjects, we create pictures in our mind that make it easier for us to display our joy in Jehovah's service. Serving Jehovah with rejoicing really depends on us. Happiness does not depend on our circumstances. Happiness comes from doing things Jehovah's way. When we actively control our thoughts, we add more pleasant pictures. And even if, in the past, we've experienced things that make it difficult to express happiness. In time, these unpleasant pictures will be buried under thoughts like those listed in Philippians chapter 4. And gradually, our inner peace, contentment, and happiness grows and can be seen by others. Jehovah, our happy God, appreciates every little step in this direction because it's important to Him that we serve Him with rejoicing. In our first video, we'll learn another way to serve Jehovah with rejoicing. You recall Jesus said, "There is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving." And isn't it true that when we give commendation, praise, and words of appreciation to others, we experience joy? In the following interviews, notice why some hesitate to express appreciation. We'll see how they were helped by applying lessons they learned from the Watchtower.
I work as a pioneer and also as a commuter at Bethel. I find this service to be very enjoyable. However, because of my busy schedule, at times I almost forget to express my appreciation to the brothers and sisters.
I wanted to express my appreciation to my wife, but I found myself feeling bashful in doing so. I knew something wasn't quite natural. Generally, expressing appreciation is considered to be a virtue. But I realized that I needed some kind of stronger motivation.
Although all 10 lepers must have been grateful, yet only one person returned to give thanks. I suddenly realized that even if I feel appreciative, I might fail to express it. Esau was an impatient man. In contrast, David thought deeply about how wonderful pure worship is. I came to realize that it is important to think deeply. One sister was visiting a very sick sister almost every day to help her with shopping and looking after her very tenderly. As I thought carefully about why she was doing so much and how she felt, I felt deep appreciation well up in me.
Jehovah richly rewards us. If Jehovah desires to express His appreciation, what kind of person am I if I don't show it from the heart? Perhaps I might be thinking to myself that I deserve to be appreciated, since I'm the one providing for my family, aren't I? I started thinking about how Jehovah wants to reward my wife. That made me want to interact with her with kinder words. I feel that the way I look at her and my facial expressions are changing as well. It gets easier to resolve disagreements quickly. I also feel that we are growing closer and closer as a couple.
By expressing appreciation, I feel very happy. My relationship with brothers and sisters within the congregation has gotten better, and the bonds of friendship between us are stronger. I realize that the reason why Jehovah encourages us to express our appreciation to others is for our happiness. That drew me even closer to Jehovah.
Expressing appreciation may not come easy for some. As we saw, we may be busy with our spiritual routine. Perhaps we are shy. We may need to make a special effort to get to know our brothers better. But what's the result if we do? We draw closer to them and to Jehovah, and that makes us happy. Being part of a loving family can bring us great joy. It also comes with responsibilities as parents, as children, and as siblings. In the following dramatization, we'll see how 3 siblings decide how to honor their elderly mother. And please note how vital good communication in the family is.
This wasn't the first health scare with Mum. And my brother and sister were always quick to help out. But this time was different. She'd be here for at least another week, then more long-term care. We just weren't prepared for that. I should have accepted more help when the friends offered. I just didn't want to be a burden. Janice understood, and she was wondering how this might affect her Bethel service. Terence wished he lived closer so he could do more. We decided to pray, sleep on it, and regroup after doing some research. I shared the example of Joseph at Genesis 45. Where he told his father, "You must dwell in the land of Goshen, where you will be near me. I will supply you with food." He didn't let a long distance get in his way of caring for Jacob. He took practical steps and made his care a priority. Janice and Terence found great articles too, offering solutions such as asking for periodic help, making more time to communicate with Mum, or even getting a part-time nurse. We weren't prepared for her situation to change so suddenly. But Jehovah is guiding us through each new challenge. And with his help, we're honouring Mum, making her care our continual priority.
In this dramatization, we saw one way that a family decided to care for an aging parent. Of course, situations will differ from one family to the next. Each must make a prayerful decision based on their circumstances. If you and your family are seeking the right way to honor your elderly parents, what can help? Bible principles. And we saw in the video open and candid communication. This, coupled with respect and love, will help you make a good decision. Now we'll look at the joy and challenges that come with raising children. We'll travel to Alaska in the United States to visit the Bodie family. Let's see what we can learn from the example set by the parents Dale and Nadja.
We were serving in a small town in Alberta, and then we began having children.
When we moved to Craig, we had 4 children, and after living here, we now have 9 children.
You were given this trust, and so as a parent, you need to put the kingdom first. You need to set a good example. You need to be at the meetings. You need to be regular in field service.
We really believed that we needed to love Jehovah first in order to be a good example to our children.
They helped us see that what would make us happy were spiritual things.
My parents, more in action than in words, taught us to seek first the kingdom.
With 9 kids, it's always going to be hectic. You have extra children, you have more excuses, perhaps.
Having 9 children is a challenge in a million ways.
And yet, yeah, she had moments where she'd sit in her rocking chair and just look so exhausted.
I remember one time when it was time to go to the meeting, but I was so exhausted. And I thought of Isaiah 40, where Jehovah says that those hoping in Jehovah will regain power. So I figured, Jehovah wants me to do it. He's going to make me strong enough to do this. So I prayed and I got ready.
It's a scramble.
In Hebrews, we see the encouragement to never forsake our meeting together. My dad always spoke of that.
There was a time that we had to travel in the wintertime, maybe up to 2 hours to get to the meeting. You'd come back to your home late at night, with all these kids that are worn out, and yourself too.
Seeing the importance that they placed on the meetings, I was able to see that you never take meetings for granted. My parents always instilled in us the consistency with service, just like meetings.
It just was what we did. That wasn't questioned. We got up on Saturday morning and we got ourselves out the door and in service.
And we couldn't simply just be backseat ornament. We knew that we were there to give a witness.
From an early age, we were really following the example of our parents in showing interest in people. So because of that, we enjoyed being in the ministry.
It gave me a sense of purpose. I had people to go visit in service. I had to know what I was going to talk to them about and have a plan.
In field service, we would often take breaks for the sake of the children and ourselves. It was important to have our children enjoy field service, not push them hard and be too rigid and so forth.
I think about Proverbs 22, verse 6 in the Byington translation, where it says to give a boy the start his course requires. They did that by putting the spiritual things before the material things.
Jehovah helped us to be the best parents we could be. We failed at times, but I always knew that Jehovah was the best parent. So if we could teach them to love him, then he would take over.
Well, we as a family were successful because we did have Jehovah in our lives. All our children are doing very well in the truth, and so we're very happy about that, and I'm sure it makes Jehovah happy.
You may not have 9 children or 7 or 5 or 2. But can't all parents learn a valuable lesson from the Bodhis? A very important lesson was mentioned by one of the daughters. She said, "Our parents, more in action than in words, taught us to seek first the kingdom." Yes, despite the many demands of a busy household, Dale and Nadja put the spiritual needs of the family first. It was their example that had a wonderful influence on all of their children. Next, we'll hear from Brother Stephen Lett of the governing body. He spoke to the Bethel family about an enemy of joy and where to find the antidote to it.
Now, my theme is guard against every sort of greed. Jehovah lovingly gave counsel to Jeremiah's secretary, Baruch, to stop seeking great things for himself. Now, what were those great things? Well, we don't know for sure. Perhaps prominence, or material things, or both. But what bad quality was developing in Baruch's heart that Jehovah saw? Greed. And the Insight book defines greed as inordinate or rapacious desire. The dictionary says it's a selfish, excessive desire for more of something such as money than is needed. So in effect, Jehovah was telling Baruch, stop being greedy. And in extended application, Jehovah tells us the same thing. Now, echoing Jehovah's counsel to Baruch is what Jesus tells us. If you'll open up to Luke chapter 12, and let's read our theme scripture here. Luke 12, verse 15, similar counsel from Jesus. Luke 12, verse 15, then he, that is Jesus, said to them, keep your eyes open and guard, now notice, against every sort of greed. Because even when a person has an abundance, his life does not result from the things he possesses. Now, what makes it a challenge, though, for us to guard against every sort of greed as Jesus' counsel? Well, our three great enemies. In fact, let's discuss each of these and how it makes it a challenge. Now, first, our imperfect flesh. At Genesis 8:21, Jehovah said, the inclination of the heart of man is bad from his youth up. And one form of badness is greed. This tendency toward greed becomes manifest very early. For example, as we see little toddlers grab things and hold them tightly. Mine, mine, mine. See, that greed is starting to manifest, isn't it? When people look at a little toddler, they may say, what a cute little boy. Or he has his mother's eyes, his father's nose. But they never invariably say, look at that little toddler, what an unselfish little toddler. No, it takes a lot of effort, doesn't it, to teach that little one to be unselfish like Jehovah. But now what about our second great enemy, Satan? What was Satan's downfall? It was greed. He allowed greedy desire for something that belonged to Jehovah alone to develop in his heart. And what was that? Greed for worship. And he wants his downfall to be our downfall. He wants to ensnare us in greed. So he tries to magnify, intensify our wrong tendency to be greedy. And if you think about it, how was Satan able to entrap the perfect woman Eve? He entrapped her in greed. He got her to crave, desire what belonged to God alone, see. In effect, he said to her, eating of all the trees of the garden minus one tree is not good enough. You should crave that one tree that has not been given to you. In fact, let me please illustrate how greedy Satan made Adam and Eve, how greedy they were. I'd like you to imagine that you have guests staying in your home. And you say, now, I really want you to make yourself at home while you're here. You take them into the kitchen. You open the refrigerator, all kinds of food here, the cabinets, the pantry. everything you could imagine that you would want to eat. It's yours, help yourself, don't even ask. But then you pull out one little drawer and you say, now I've set aside some items for a later occasion. Please, it's very important, do not eat from this one drawer. But you'll find other items just like in the drawer, in the pantry, in the cabinets. You'll have everything you need. Now, would that be overly restrictive? Would that be an unloving arrangement with your guests? It'd be very generous, wouldn't it? And in effect, that's the arrangement Jehovah made with Adam and Eve. But now back to the illustration. If you came into the kitchen and you found your guest eating out of that one drawer you had not given them, you'd be very upset, wouldn't you? And you'd probably view it as stealing. And you likely would put the thieves out of your house. So that illustrates how Jehovah felt and how Jehovah reacted. But what a protection being content with what was rightfully hers would have been to Eve. But now what about our third great enemy? The world. We are relentlessly surrounded by Satan's world and his spirit called the spirit of the world. We could say that Jehovah breathes Holy Spirit to influence his people to act like him and be unselfish. But Satan, in effect, exhales the stinky spirit of the world that makes people act like him in being greedy. And one way Satan's world promotes greed for material things is by the relentless advertising. See, people are constantly bombarded with advertisements. For example, here's just an example. They may bring out a shiny new car, has about 12 coats of wax on it. They got all these spotlights shining on it. They bring in a camera from all different angles. And about this time, a scantily clothed woman comes strolling out to that automobile. And you don't even notice it, but there's soft music playing in the background. As she opens the door, gets in, a crescendo is reached in the background music. You're made to feel, you poor loser, if you don't have that car, see? They don't talk about the heavy payments you're going to have to make, how many meetings you're going to have to miss to make those payments. You poor loser, if you don't have that car. And similar advertising methods are used very often in promoting many other gadgets and material things. So obviously we have to fight hard against the spirit of the world so that we don't allow it to nurture greed in our hearts. In fact, if we're not careful, our love for Jehovah could be squeezed out by love for money and love for material things. And if this happens, rather than conquering the world as Jesus did, the world will have conquered us. Now, it admittedly is a great challenge to fight these three great enemies and avoid, as Jesus counseled, every sort of greed. But now think of that. Jesus indicated it's not just one sort of greed, one kind of greed. Greed can take on various faces, manifestations, see, but we're to guard against all of them. What would you say is the antidote that can immunize us against the poison of greed? Well, is it not contentment, see? For example, one sort of greed, we talked about greed for material things. Well, contentment will immunize us against this terrible form of greed. We're familiar with 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 8. So having food and clothing, and the footnote adds shelter, we will be content with these things. So contentment really protects us. And in effect, that's what Jehovah was telling Barak. He was telling him, you have what you need. Stop storing up great things or seeking great things. Be content with what you have and do more important things. And then he gave a powerful reason why Barak should do this. Jehovah told him in Jeremiah 45:5, for I'm about to bring a calamity on all flesh. So if you get the mastery over this, I will grant you your life as a spoil. Well, the same applies to us, doesn't it? Jehovah is soon going to bring a calamity on all flesh, And so we need to be content with what we really need and seek first the kingdom. We're just temporary residents, aren't we? That's what 1 Peter 1:17 says. Now, here's an illustration about a temporary resident. I'd like you to imagine we rent a venue for our regional convention. Now, you may do a few things to make the stay more comfortable in that venue. For example, you may do thorough cleaning. You might do some touch-up painting. Might repair some broken toilets or light fixtures, but you would never paint and plaster the entire stadium inside and out. You wouldn't rip up the seats and put all new seating in. You wouldn't tear out the parking lot, put in a new parking lot, because you're just a temporary resident. You're going to vacate that place after the weekend. Now, unlike the illustration, we don't know exactly when we're going to vacate, but we know it's soon. So we keep it simple. We're just temporary residents. Another sort of greed for prominence, but being content with how generous Jehovah has been in giving us so many privileges will protect us from this greed. It would have protected Korah in Moses' time. Another sort of greed is greedy sexual desire. If we're single or married, being content with what rightfully belongs to us, see, will really be a protection. It would have protected David from his sin with Bathsheba. Or there are other sorts of greed, such as gluttony and drunkenness. But the antidote for all of these is contentment. Contentment with what is rightfully ours that Jehovah has given to us. And if we are successful in guarding against every sort of greed, then we'll be on hand to enjoy the marvelous time when Jehovah will open his hand and satisfy every proper desire of every living thing.
Full-time service is a special way to serve Jehovah with a joyful heart. But what happens to your joy when you suddenly face a serious trial? Jay and Elaine Humer, you have been through this. Thank you for being here today to share your personal experience with us. You've enjoyed full-time service for over 40 years, many of those years in the traveling work.
Yes, we've had a wonderful privilege of both pioneering and serving the traveling work for 30 years now. Mm-hmm. And we really feel Jehovah's been very kind to allow us to serve him this way.
I remember when I first filled out my application for regular pioneering back in 1972, and I thought, this was my gift to Jehovah, my sacrifice. But after the many years of the blessings and the privileges and how Jehovah helped us through some very difficult times, what I thought was my gift to Jehovah turned out to be his gift to me.
This is very encouraging, thank you. Now, you mentioned difficult times. Is there anything in particular you think of?
One of the hardest things that we faced was about 20 years ago when we experienced 7 deaths in just a 6-month period.
This really was difficult because 5 of those 7 were family members. Jay's father died, my Aunt Elma, who brought me into the truth, died, and my father died. So it just seemed one layer on top of another.
We can hardly imagine how you must have felt. Now, after such a Job-like experience, what did you do in order to regain your joy and happiness?
Well, it didn't occur automatically. We kept focused, of course, on serving the friends and working with them, and that kept our thoughts from constantly circling around our losses. We also thought about the resurrection. We focused on the resurrection hope, and as we did, it became like the helmet of salvation, protecting our hearts and our thoughts from the grief that we were going through. And then, of course, we shared our hope with others, and that helped us to have it more deeply engraved on our own hearts as well.
Yeah, thank you. So now, maybe learn from you what you did in practical terms.
The most difficult of all was about 4 years after that, when our beloved nephew Christopher was killed in an auto accident at the age of 17. He and his parents had lived with us in the same house for a number of years before he went on the road. And we always looked at Christopher like the son that we would never have this side of Armageddon. So his death was particularly tragic.
It was excruciating for all of our family members, especially his parents. Christopher was on his way to the Kingdom Hall to meet his papa and his grandmother for field service, and his car hit a patch of ice and slid into an oncoming car. he died instantly. This was so difficult on us. Our hearts were broken and our spirits were nearly crushed. It actually rendered me speechless. Even to beg for the groanings unuttered became very difficult. I didn't speak to Jehovah for 3 days, but I was listening.
What do you mean by listening?
I remember when we were all together as a family, and my sister just happened to say that Christopher had been cremated. We were there making arrangements for the funeral, and it just hit me so hard. It just hit hard enough that I fell down, and I just cried. I laid there on the floor, and I thought about perhaps maybe Mary felt this way when she said, "Lord, if you'd only been here, this wouldn't have happened." But as I laid there, I could hear my sister say, "Go get her Bible, read her favorite scripture." And so Jay did. He turned to Psalm 91, a psalm that I had already memorized. And now I began to hear Jehovah's voice.
So was this listening to Jehovah a one-time occurrence?
No, by no means. I really had to now do my research. So I searched for every article on the resurrection. I searched for every scripture on comfort. And I meditated on the artwork, the pictures in the publication. I remember one particular scripture that really touched my heart. It was from Psalm 56, verse 8. And in there it said, "You keep track of my wandering. Do collect my tears from your skin bottle. Are they not recorded in your book?" And I thought about Jehovah taking such notice of us, keeping track, watching over, even collecting every tear and recording each of them. That truly made me draw close to Jehovah.
So you continued to listen to Jehovah by looking at comforting material from the publications. Was there a specific article you think of?
There was an article. It was about a delicate flower that had been bent over after a rainstorm, the kind of cloudburst that would send humans and animals running for shelter. But not this flower. Here it was, intact, bent over but unbroken and still rooted. I thought about us in that same way. The article said that we can no more avoid losing a loved one than this flower could uproot itself and run for cover. It had to endure it. But the article spoke a great deal about hope and about faith. Hope is our anchor, and hope is our preserver of our spirituality. And faith, James chapter 1, verse 3, stated in there that faith, when it succeeds, we're able to endure. And so that's exactly what happened. It softened the grief. And so like this flower, we too would stand up and smile one day. And we did. I remember the first time I smiled inside, and I thought, "Oh, Jehovah, you truly are a healer of hearts."
So did you do something else?
Now I started looking for some of the artwork in the publications. And one particular picture I found was of a shepherd who had gone into a bramble bush and rescued a lamb. He was lost. He pulled him out, threw him over his shoulders, and held on to him. And I thought, what a safe place to be, such security. I decided to take the picture and to print it out and just enlarge it a little bit. But what I didn't see on the publication page, I saw when I enlarged it, and that there were scratches on the shepherd's face. And I thought what that shepherd had gone through to go in the bramble bush and pull him out. And then I thought about Jehovah as our great shepherd and the lengths that he went to rescue us, even at the cost of pain for himself. Now I was listening and drawing back close to Jehovah.
So then, what did you do with these articles and the pictures?
So now I decided to print them all out. The articles, the pictures, and the scriptures, and I displayed them on my desk for quite some time. But I put them in a big envelope, or like a file, and I thought that was Jehovah's sympathy card to me.
We knew we had to do something so as not to be swept away by our grief. It's been said that grief is an arduous journey, but one that we cannot avoid. It's not a place where we live, but a passage, as it were. And we know that even though grief never goes away, it does change over time. That's because Jehovah made our hearts to heal, and so in time, that's what we did.
Yeah, he sure did. It's not about the lack of faith. It's simply the price of love. We loved Christopher, and we miss him.
It wasn't like we were leaving him behind. Sometimes that's how you feel when you lose a loved one. But in reality, we know that Christopher is in Jehovah's memory. And as the righteous God, Jehovah never forgets his loyal ones. Christopher was one of them. So we're confident that we're going to see him again. And that's what helps us not to be, as it were, looking always in the rearview mirror, but looking ahead to the time when we will be with him in paradise.
You know, Jehovah truly kept his promises, and he carried us through that storm. He gathered up the pieces of our broken hearts and sealed them. And even though this happened 17 years ago, sure, we still have cracks in our hearts, but we know for certainty those one day will disappear as well in that paradise when we welcome him back home. And so Jehovah truly proved to be my stronghold, my father, and my friend in a profound way. We learn that Jehovah truly does love us and care, protects us, and because he is such a good father, our joy has come back, and we have had such a rich life.
So in all the years we've had the privilege of serving our God, we've always found that no matter what we give Jehovah, no matter what sacrifices we make for him, he always gives us more. You can out-generous the most generous person in the universe. And so just as he has blessed us all these many years, we're confident that he will continue to bless us as we transition to our next assignment.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences with us. And may Jehovah continue to be with the two of you as you now continue your full-time service as special pioneers. And may you be able to apply the principles that you have just mentioned so that Jehovah can continue to guard your hearts.
Thank you.
As we discussed earlier, happiness does not depend on our circumstances, but on our thoughts and our outlook. And we can influence our thoughts by what we picture in our mind's eye. We'll see that beautifully brought to life in our new music video entitled The New World to Come.
Take a moment now and picture the scene. Up ahead on the path are what seem to be children laughing at play. In a world free of the fears we once faced, and taking care of this beautiful earth are a people that live by our Father's words until the moon is no more. There is the peace we have been waiting for. We will feel his love under the rule of his Son in the new world to come. Hope is a fire in our hearts. Hope is an anchor that holds us firm. Hope is a light that shines like the sun as we see ourselves there in the new world to come. Take a moment now and think of our place by the mountains and rivers or wide open plains. It's a place to call home. And now walking in through your front door, there is someone that you know, holding out his open arms in hopes of a tearful embrace. Feels like forever since you've been face to face. Even death won't stop our God's outstretched love in the new world to come. Hope is a fire in our hearts. Hope is an anchor that holds us firm. Hope is a light that shines like the sun ourselves there in the new world to come. And every word from his mouth, will do all for which he sent it out. Jehovah's will for this earth is fulfilling every living thing's last wish. Like the sun, as we see ourselves there in the new world to come. In the new world to come. In the new world to come. In the new world to come.
You'll probably want to listen to that song again and again, or you might even want to sing it yourself. Our hope is one of the things we want to focus on. And this will have an effect on us. It will contribute to us being joyful. Let's conclude this month's program with a visit to a truly beautiful part of the earth, Martinique. This island in the Eastern Caribbean measures just 50 miles or about 80 kilometers by 22 miles or 35 kilometers. Yet Martinique, nicknamed the Island of Flowers, has stunning geographic diversity with beaches, forests, rivers, sugarcane plantations, and rugged mountains. The highest point is Mount Pully, infamous for causing the deadliest volcanic eruption in the 20th century. When Pully erupted in 1902, nearly 30,000 people died because they ignored the warnings. This tragedy is often discussed by our brothers in the ministry. Today, more than 4,700 publishers in 62 congregations share the good news in 8 languages, including French, English, French Sign Language, Arabic, and Creole of Martinique. They conduct more than 4,500 Bible studies, nearly 1 per publisher. Over 1 million tourists visit this beautiful island every year, many by cruise ship. This presents a unique preaching opportunity. The city of Le Marin hosts 55,000 boaters annually. Here our brothers preach sailboat to sailboat. This is the city of La Trinité. A Creole of Martinique congregation was formed here 2 years ago. Today, the congregation has 91 publishers and 10 regular pioneers. They preach in the countryside, the foothills, wherever people can be found. Our brothers and sisters in La Trinité Martinique send you their warm Christian love and greetings. From the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, this is JW Broadcasting.